All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next concurrent session of the day, Blended or Hybrid Course Learning and Teaching in Action. Our presenter today is Lisa Deal from the University of North Georgia. Ms. Deal is a senior lecturer of English and has been teaching composition and a British literature survey course at the University of North Georgia for the past 11 years. She has a certificate of completion in diversity issues, and she is a Quality Matters certified instructor. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll be able to address those at the end of the talk. And on that note, I will go ahead and hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay. Welcome to my presentation on blended learning in the composition classroom. That was a wonderful introduction. A little bit of background for me. Hang on here 1 minute while I do the slide here. Little introduction on me, my education, my certifications, and my teaching experience. One of my proudest moments is after I did this presentation a few times was receiving the Excellence in Teaching Award in 2019 from UNG. So that's one of my proudest moments. The reason that I put this together is because a few years ago, I was asked to teach a blended class where we would meet 1 day a week, and then the next class time we would do online. And if you're anything like me, this was all new to me, and this was partly because of the pandemic. And so some of the questions I asked is, you want me to teach a blended learning class? I didn't even know what it was. I'd been teaching face-to-face the whole time. And, you know, I wasn't really given the choice. It was highly recommended, kind of like the military, you know, you don't volunteer unless you're asked. But I began to change my mind pretty quickly when I started to research and learn about what blended learning or hybrid learning is all about. And in the first part of my presentation, we're going to go over some of the pros and cons of blended learning. And then I'm going to show you some specific examples that I have from two of my courses, English 1101 and 1102, and the activities that I did in reference to a blended learning class. So one of the first things that I think is important is to really define what blended learning is. And Michael Horn and Staker have really done, I think, a really good job on describing that. It's personalized, it's competency-based. If it's implemented well and jointly, it can be the basis of a student-centered learning. And that's always my goal as an educator, is to have the student-centered learning. In a lot of ways, I found that in a hybrid class, my students were starting to become more responsible and they took ownership for their progress. They liked the fact we met once a week because then they knew what the assignments would be for that next course. And they kept up with it and they seemed more engaged, at least in my view. So here is a really good chart on what is blended learning. It takes the human element, the educator, and it blends it with the technology. And it's not as simple as it sounds, because a lot of what blended learning involves is, as educators, we have to be much more involved than just teaching face-to-face. We have to have the technology background. If you don't have the technology background, ask your technology people to help you. I really was forced to get much, much better at the online environment than I have when I was teaching face-to-face. So blended learning is the formal education program in which a student learns. They learn to control their time, their place, their path. And in some, you know, it's kind of a supervised face-to-face, and yet it gives the student the flexibility, if they're working, which many of my students are, to really figure out what is the best time for them to do their work. And I'm not going to kid you, there's pros and cons to this program. I'm not going to go over this, but it does show you how some of the blended learning does work out well. And we're also finding that in this COVID world, that we have to be much more creative about how we teach and where we teach. And so these are some of the different blended learning models. There's obviously the face-to-face. It can be done in an online lab. There's a lot of different ways that it can be modeled. I also provide this because this really helped me a lot to really see, what I could do for students when they were at home learning, and then what I could do for the students in person. I liked the differentiated model because I felt that I could interact with both. Students would do some research on the day that they weren't in class. They'd watch videos. And at the same time, I could have students, when they were face-to-face with me, working in small groups. I like students working in groups. And there are some other types of activities here. Pardon me, allergies are killing me. And so this shows you how the progression goes: face-to-face, blended, hybrid, and online. Because my hybrid class was so successful, I am now teaching online, all online. So this really helped me to make that extra step towards the online learning. And some of the blended learning benefits are students have greater flexibility. There is more increased engagement to the online content because I would explain it in class, and the ability to learn at his or her own pace. And it encourages that ownership of learning. Faculty, there's a potential time saving through less in-person learning, higher quality interactions with students, because you're not only meeting them, but you're also meeting with them online. This is the part that I really like about it. It gives you the ability to appeal to varying learning styles. We all know that our students learn differently, and I try to do as much as I can to address all those different thinking and learning styles. It really caused me in the face-to-face instruction to be much more direct, and I think I really became a better educator because of it, because I had to really, really plan and think about how that face-to-face course was going to go hand in hand with the technology part of it. And there's also an increased collaboration among students. Some of the administrative benefits, there's a cost savings because of the brick and mortar, better student data because we can use that to measure learning more specifically, opportunities to upskill faculty. Some of my faculty who teach face-to-face still are not comfortable with technology. I'm a lot more comfortable with it now because of the hybrid situation that I was in. And it also gives you the ability to expand course offering to more students. I teach in a public university in Georgia, and a lot of our students work. They don't come from wealthy families. A lot of them are first-time college attendees, and they have to work to help support getting themselves through college. So it really has worked well there as well. And here are the challenges. One of the biggest issues, this is the challenges that the research says, is retaining teacher authenticity. I didn't want it to get old or to get repetitive in that second session. And you really have to be able to create an effective self-paced learning environment. And then also building student authentic mastery. And the key, this is really important, the key to a successful hybrid model is going to be the same as any other year: relationships and flexibility. And as educators, if we haven't learned anything over the last few years, we have learned to be flexible. Many of us have not had a choice. So that's really one of the key elements. over the past few years in 1101, 1102 English composition course, I created a social justice themed course, and I decided to also do that for my 1101 class. Those are composition classes. And I'm going to take you through a few details and examples. I'm not going to read everything, but at least you'll have this available because it's being recorded. So in the English 1101 organization, and this was hybrid, this is how I set the class up: online discussions, online reflection, journal responses, readings, and essays. And that first class, each week, we would talk about the material. We would discuss some of the readings, and then I would turn that into online discussion that could be discussed on that next class period online. And so one of the things that I felt was important, especially for social justice class, and especially for talking about a text called The New Jim Crow, was the danger of a single story. And I asked students to summarize that. We talked about what was the summary, what that entailed. We had a discussion in class about what we thought were the important parts of a summary. And then they went on the next class period, and they talked about it. And some of these are really good. One young lady said, Adichie wants us to understand how important it is to have a grasp on a whole culture and not just a little chunk of it, and just assume that it is for everyone. Single-sided stories can be very dangerous. And I found that this was a really, really good way to open up the discussion of social justice and the discussion of racism, because she is from a country where her classmates and her playmates and all of that had the same color skin she had. And for her to say, hey, I had this stereotype about what an American child looked like, blonde hair and blue eyes, because that's all that I learned from the literature that I read. And it really helped to open up some of the students. The other students said that behind the embedded stereotypes that exist in society, there's human beings, and that we're all different. And that this person gave the summary saying that she boiled down to the ideals that single stories create stereotypes and create mistruths that completely misconstrue the common perception of singular people and societies. I thought this was excellent for 1101 students. I also did an activity where we examined our own prejudices. Now, this is further on in the course, so we've had a little more opportunity. During the class, I gave each student an index card. And on the card, I asked them to write a couple of sentences about a group that they've had difficulty with, whether ethnic background, religious beliefs. I told them not to put their name on the card, but then it was important for you to be honest. And I collected the card and read them aloud anonymously. And then they had to do a journal entry addressing those. And this is some of what they came up with. Republicans only think about money and don't know what it's like to be hungry. Transgenders are not cool, whatever it might be. So this really opened up going into the next particular assignment, which was viewing a TV spot that was called What Would You Do? This is a program that puts people in different situations. And they had a particular film about somebody stealing a bicycle. The bicycle was tied to the rack with a lock. And the first thing that they did was they showed a white young man trying to steal the bicycle, and he actually had some people help him. They showed a blonde white woman, long blonde hair, and she actually had some men come up to her and say, "Hey, I'll help you with it." And then there was an African-American male, and nobody helped him. And in fact, 3 people actually called 911 to report him. And so it really ended up being a really good way to talk about racism. And you can see some of the issues that we talked about, discussing racism. Why is it important to acknowledge and discuss racism? And these were some really, really good comments, I thought. This shows the significant impact of how race and stereotypes go into play as our daily lives. And then there were some other good comments. 2 very important reasons are to understand how the society we live in today came, and that the past causes the present and so the future. Really, really good comments, I thought. And then I also asked them to research a quote about racism. And these are all activities that I had designed to discuss and talk about in face-to-face class, and then have them go and produce a particular artifact during that technology course, online part of it. And so I asked them to research a quote about racism, stereotyping, bias, and I wanted them to think about the subject the quote was addressing, why the quote was important and its message and theme, and then state the specific connection to the quote. And so some of the responses were very good. They had a quote, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin." And that was from Nelson Mandela. One student came out with a Booker T. Washington quote. They really liked this exercise instead of me telling them that you have to look up this quote from a specific person, because they really chose what I thought were very good people and very good responses to that. I also asked them to do this, and this worked out very well. Many of the students in my face-to-face class were living on campus. Some of them were not. So I asked them, for this assignment, compose a description using the elements of description described in the narrative writing PowerPoint. Go to the most intriguing and mysterious place on campus, some favorite building, whatever it might be. List 10 descriptive details that you observe using all 5 senses. Using your details, write a paragraph that narrates your experience. Tell me the story about your experience. Use first-person point of view. Don't say it was a beautiful day outside. Tell me why. Show me the details. Be expressive. And then write a second paragraph that offers 3 insights from your observations about what you learned. I'm big into reflections, and we'll probably get into that in a minute. But some of these were excellent. And as I said, I'm not going to read them because it takes a lot longer. But when you go back and look at the recording, you will see what some of these activities were. It was wonderful. And here's a reflection. I'm big on reflections because after every unit, I want students to think about what they've learned, to think about what they could do better. And so I asked them to write a reflection all the time. And it's not about, oh yeah, I really like this lesson. I want them to really, really think about it. And they have to use in-text citations from what they produce. This is some of the narrative writing reflection. There were some of those reflections here, which were really good. And now we can explore the English 1102 class. I'm not going to go into this. This is, all of how I produced it and everything. The first thing I start out with here is I have students read the 10 principles of social justice, and then they have to choose 5 out of those 10 principles and make their own definition, excuse me, of social justice. And they also have to describe why they chose those particular principles. And this is a really good way of getting them to figure out what that means. What is social justice? What does it mean? Why is it important? This was also a race and visual analysis that I did. I just took a bunch of pictures and I asked the students to choose one of the pictures. And I gave them specific topics, specific things to talk about. I wanted them to describe what they see in the photograph and then write a descriptive sentence or two about the overall message that it conveys about race and or racism. And we had learned about denotive and connotative meanings in the face-to-face class. So now they had to take that and apply it in this virtual response. And I also asked them about, how do you think a person who is either from the culture, gender, or ethnic background of the persons in the photograph would respond to it, and why? How has examining this photograph helped you to understand a little bit more about racism? And these were some of the responses. He describes the image, he talks about denotive, and then he feels that, I feel that other Latinos, whether they be male or female, would be upset with what is portrayed in the photo. A man categorized him as a Latino and gave him the name Garcia just because of how he looked. And the person doing the introduction is demeaning them and is offensive. Another student chose this young lady, and she's holding up a sign that says, "You're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl." And this student went on to discuss and verify that this to her was racism. And she talked about the denotive. She said she thought that somebody from the same culture, gender, or ethnic background would be outraged. Inequality of females is real, and females should build each other up regardless of race, culture, or ethnicity. And she said, I think people of the same culture or ethnic background would be outraged as well, because that is something they take pride in and should take pride in. Someone demeaning their background that they share is very offensive and disgusting. So this photo helped me to understand that people really don't think before they speak. Another young lady is holding a sign that said, "Can you read this?" He showed me a Japanese character on his phone. And this really was a really good response, because this person made the connection to what we read in class, which was The Myth of the Latin Woman, I Just Met a Girl Named Maria by Kofer. And she made that direct connection to say, hey, this is what Kofer was talking about in her essay. And as you can see, she went into great detail. And she said, depending upon the person's personality, a person from the culture and ethnic background depicted can either play it off and answer the boy's question, or they can confront him and teach the boy about the stereotype. So not only was this teaching students to critically think about the picture and to think about the people that are exposed to this type of commentary, but it also made them think about why it's important for them to understand this particular issue. And she said, by examining this photograph, I learned that racism is not just between whites and blacks. All groups are subject to stereotypes. And even if it wasn't intended, it's still inconsiderate and is not justified. After that particular activity, I asked students to write a privilege reflection, because that is information and readings that we had gone over in class. And so I gave them the option. I said, in lieu of just writing an essay, I'm challenging you to be creative with developing your reflective response. They had to follow the same guidelines that they would for writing an essay, but this gives them the opportunity to use graphics, art, comics, photos, video response, role play, whatever they wanted to come up with that would convey what they had learned about privilege. And some of the PowerPoints and the presentations that I viewed were astounding. And it says, if you choose a creative response, you have to meet all of the criteria. And this is an opportunity. And I wasn't sure about how students would like this. I also gave them the option that they could write the standard reflection essay. I thought this was important, though, to share some of the reflections that the students came up with. This is one that she's explaining. White privilege is a level of societal advantage. And so to her, this was a really good visual. Now, some of these I just took slides from some of their presentations. This one, which I thought was excellent, holding up a sign, "We have value." This young lady was really struggling in the class until this assignment. She said for the background of this presentation, I chose to stress wood. I picked this because white privilege makes me feel disadvantaged. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. Go back. Made her gain a better understanding. And so to her, the oppressed wood and the harshness of the wood, to her, really reflected what she had learned about privilege. And she says, I've included these two different landscapes to show how a person of color's journey may look like a jagged mountain, whereas a white person's journey may look more like this grassy hill. Well, as an educator, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, to me, this was just wonderful. And it really showed to me how when I, as a comp and rhetoric educator, allow students to have that choice of being creative, for some of them, they run with it. And they really show not only their critical thinking skills, but also the fact that they're integrating the material that they're reading, and they're beginning to understand some of the issues we've been talking about. And I was just very excited about that. She did a really good job. For the final exam in the 1102 class, I have them write a self-assessment letter, but it's not as easy as it might sound. And I tell them it has to be in business letter format. And I say, this is not an opportunity for you to reflect on yourself. This is an opportunity for you to reflect on yourself objectively. And please note that this is not an opportunity to sell yourself and or advise me of the grade you need. Tell me what you have learned about yourself as a scholar, a writer, and a person. I do not want this response to be a regurgitation of the grades you have received. I want you to reflect and think about what you have learned and what you still need to do to be a reflective scholar and thinker. And so I give them a list. I say, be proud. Tell me what you have done well and tell me what you still need to work on. Also be honest. Be honest about your academic skills. Be honest about your critical thinking skill and your analytical skills. Tell me what you still need to improve. Be specific about what you need to improve and how you would do it. Be professional. Do not use jargon, abbreviations, or informal words. And by the time they get to this point, they know through their grades what I consider to be jargon and abbreviations or informal words. And then I also advise them to be reflective. This is your opportunity to assess not only your writing skills, but your leadership skills and your communication skills. And then I want them to write a conclusion. This area must reflect on what you have learned in this course and any surprises, challenges, disagreements, conflicts, ideas that you have learned, that you want to learn, or that you expect to help you improve your communication skills. And so I tell them, do this in business format. If you struggle with this assignment, I tell them, go back and look over your writing assignments. Go back and look over the discussions. And so this was some of the responses. And to me, this is probably the most valuable feedback that I receive students about what they think of what they've learned in the class. This student said, the peer editing process in your class has given me confidence to successfully edit and review someone's writing. I want someone to tell me their thoughts on my writing, so I learn to do the same. I want to know if they have any ideas to improve my writing. If my peers were afraid of peer writing, I would not have received the help that I did. My grade may not have been as good if I did not take your advice. This student said, finally, throughout this class, I learned how to become a better writer, take notice of the problems that are going on in society around me, how to stand up for someone else, and how to teach others about racism and their white privilege. And this person took this from one of the presentations that I did in the class. Quote, if I make a mistake, I can ask people of color what I can do to fix it, or peers toward the perspective of people of color. And what I really like is that they did the in-text citation correctly. This class has taught me lessons that I will carry with me throughout my life. This student 6 also did other, and there's one here, this assignment that I am most proud of would have to be the racism reflection. Racism is definitely a sensitive topic for me to discuss. Normally, I don't feel well talking about racism in a classroom because I'm usually the only person of color. This causes me to feel awkward, vulnerable, and embarrassed. However, this class helped me to become more confident and comfortable when it comes to discussing topics like racism and other social justice issues. I enjoyed writing the racism reflection because I was able to describe and define racism while reflecting on my own experiences and relating to the authors from the required readings. This student said, I must admit I learned more than I expected. At the beginning of the course, I had a very narrow view of the topic, and now for the most part, they feel that they have done much, much better. This student, this is probably one of the reflections that really affected me the most. This student said, I'm not usually a confident person because I feel like I don't know what I'm talking about. In a student essay, the author said, because our female role models are treated like this in the public eye, it follows quite logically that women shy away from creating spaces for themselves in powerful roles. With being in this class that was full of females that understood each other on how we are treated in society. In class, I remember discussing catcalling and pickup lines that women had to deal with daily. I participated in the discussion and I was backed up by other females, by them agreeing. I also remember that day and all that the males in the room realized that actually happens to females. This is how I became competent with just being myself in that class. There are other examples here of really good responses that I felt were really good feedback. And here, this student said, I'm going to continue to challenge myself and look forward to learning about various ways to make advancements towards achieving social equality. And so this was not just about, talking about social justice issues. They were also writing about these issues. They were thinking about how they could communicate effectively in an online environment with their discussions online. And also it gave them the opportunity to really apply their critical thinking skills, which I think is one of the most important factors in what we're teaching them in comp and rhetoric. So I know that was a quick review, but now I can open it up to questions or comments or anything that people need clarification on.
And a quick reminder for everyone, you can submit any questions that you may have right now into the Q&A box within the Zoom screen.
So that means they have to talk, right?
No, they can submit them just by typing in the questions in the Q&A. So I've got that up.
Okay.
So it's anything. So I'll let you know, but we can give everyone a few minutes.
No questions.
Give everyone another minute here to see if there's somebody might be typing something long. You never know.
I know. And I'm willing to share this presentation. I think you all record it too, don't you?
Correct.
So
Yes.
if they want to go back and look at some of my examples or whatever, they have that opportunity to do so. And
Absolutely.
I would like to get some feedback on what they thought of some of the activities that I did in that blended environment, hybrid environment. So if they have any ideas. I think one of the questions was, will you be sharing any of these documents? Oh, yes, I have them all. Whatever anybody wants, I'm more than happy. And like you said, you're going to have a copy of this as well. So no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone, this is recorded, so it will be available on the main conference website after we're done with the few days. We'll deal with all the recordings, get them all separated, so you can just go and watch any of the individual meetings on demand. So it
And
looks like
for anybody who wants my email, it's Lisa, Lisa dot Deal, DIEHL at UNG.edu. And I am more than happy to share a lot of other activities that I have as well if you want to. Oh, thank you. Somebody put it in there.
you're very welcome. It actually looks like we have a few questions that have come in now. So let me look at this. So this is one from Christine. It says, do you utilize the discussion board for students to engage in additional chats about specific issues that you discuss in class as well? And then also, do you have any suggestions regarding using this tool for English language learners that may be at a lower level in order for them to feel included?
Yeah, what I have found, one of the good things that I really, really like about discussions is that the shyer students or the students who don't feel real comfortable about some of their writing skills, it seems to me that after a time, and I've had several students make this comment to me, that they learn a lot from the discussions, not only to open themselves up to feel more comfortable, but they also learn some writing skills. They're learning from other students to say, oh, okay, now I understand what this discussion was supposed to be about. And so they're also learning those effective communication skills. I work with students in the discussions, and I don't do it in the whole discussion. I do it as an email where I'll send students and say, I really liked your point here, but how about you go back in and you really explain more what you were talking about here, because I think it's important for other people to learn, other students to learn that. And so what I have found is that students seem to be more comfortable learning from their fellow students. And the discussion boards, I think because you don't actually see the person, it tends to make students more comfortable to communicate back and forth with one another. So yes, I do have an online chat where students can go in and informally talk about things. And any student that I think is struggling, I work with independently.
Perfect. So let's see right now. Somebody posted in, this presentation was great. Thank you. I don't have a hybrid class right now, but I look forward to seeing how I can apply this thematic unit approach to my face-to-face Blackboard enhanced course.
Yeah, and I think you can apply a lot of these activities to an online course, to a face-to-face course. Like I said, I'm now teaching all online. And essentially, I'm teaching all online because of the blended learning environment that I did for 2 years. So it's a really, really good way to teach yourself. I mean, I was one of those educators who didn't want to, I don't need to learn all that technical stuff. I'm getting too old for that. I didn't have a choice. And I'm an educator. I want to do everything I can to help my students learn. So even though it was a learning process for me, I explained that to my students. I told my students, I said, hey, I'm just learning this technology. If you have any ideas or you have any suggestions for technology that you would think would work well, they even taught me, oh, well, Mrs. Deal, you can do this and this and this. And so to them, they were really impressed with the fact that I asked them what they thought might be good technology. And so it's that collaborative environment and getting them to look at themselves as scholars, because that's essentially what they are. They are scholars in learning scholars. And so this really gets them to build that confidence as well.
And it looks like Christine had a follow-up to their previous questions. So they said, after teaching online classes for the past 2 years, I found that writing is the toughest course to teach because you don't have that in-class support to really view student progress. Any suggestions for making this easier?
Well, I can tell you what I do. I give the students 2 weeks to write an essay. And the first week they have to come up with a rough draft for peer editing. And then the second week they finalize their essay. Well, what I do, and I have found very effective with my students, is I ask them to meet with me about their rough drafts, and we actually discuss it. We discuss, well, why did you say this? Or what do you think would work here? Or what do you feel uncomfortable about in your essay? And we do it on Zoom. And it has worked out to be very effective. I can tell you that meeting with the student one-on-one and going over their essay, I've actually done the research in my classes, and their grade goes up. And it also teaches them that writing is not just this isolated activity that you do on your own. It teaches them that they have an audience. And once they start to realize that, then they start to become much more specific about what they're writing about. And so that's the way that I do it. I also like some of the teamwork. Well, I'll put students together, and far along enough in the course, I'm able to tell who might have a little struggle here and who might have a little struggle there. And I pair them up with what I consider to be a stronger student. And that really works as well. It really takes a good student to do that. But I've just experimented with all different types of situations. And that's the best way for me to do it, is to go one-on-one with the student. We can share their essay, we can talk about issues, we can talk about ideas. And it really makes it much more effective for them.
Awesome. So it looks like we had a couple other comments. I don't know if there was much questions, but one person said, "Thank you for showing how to teach a hard topic." It's a really
Yeah. Writing is a tough topic. And it's not just about writing, but it's also about effective communicating. That's how I approach it. Whatever way I can get students to communicate effectively, I'm there. And that's why I integrated, letting them do a PowerPoint or this or that. They're still communicating effectively and they're still getting their point across. And so to me, depending upon what career they go into, they're going to have to orally communicate with people as well as in writing. And so as educators, that's what we also need to focus on.
Absolutely. And then Karen said, I came in a little late, but the few I heard sounded great. I'm looking for how to improve students' critical thinking skills. I run a tutoring center, so I want to build it in.
By all means. And like I said, ask the students for feedback. Ask them how it went. They'll be brutally honest with you.
Understand that. All right, so it looks like that was the last questions. Christine just asked where they can find the slides to review. So Lisa, have you put their email in the chat? I can paste it in one more time for everyone to see. But also this recording, as well as all the other recordings, will be available later if you want to go back to review that. So they will be available that way for sure.
And I love sharing. So any ideas that you have for me to enhance teaching online, these are tough courses to teach, especially social justice. So far, I haven't gotten any pushback. We'll see how it goes in the future. Feel free to email me.
Awesome. All right, so it looks like we're just about at our time limit, so you can go ahead and I'll say a quick thank you to everyone.
Planned that well.
Yeah, that was perfect. So I'll say thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to Ms. Steele for all the valuable information that you shared. So quick notes for everyone. The next concurrent session will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern time. You can view the chat for the session meeting room links or to access the conference website for a complete list of the concurrent sessions and their descriptions. and I'll be pasting those links in the chat in just a moment. Now, while accessing the conference website, please do not forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team if you have not already. You can view a quick 5-minute demonstration to be entered to win one of the hourly giveaways that we're doing. And those are going to be your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, a 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. So those are some pretty solid prizes for 5 minutes of your time that you could potentially win. So once again, thank you to everyone for attending, and we'll see you all at the next session. And I'll have all those links in the chat in just a moment. Should see those in there now.